Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. A government shutdown is now in effect for the first time in 6 years. What it means for you and how Republicans are working to shore up the needed Democratic support to fund the government.
Several homes washed away in North Carolina as two hurricanes churn in the Atlantic. Plus Bermuda bracing for impact from Hurricane Imelda, packing 85-mile-an-hour winds.
Major arrests as ICE takes suspected child predators and human traffickers off the streets. And Missouri activates the National Guard to assist with rounding up illegal immigrants.
Bomb squads detonate a suspicious device at Utah State University just before a Turning Point USA event. Charlie Kirk's organization returns to Utah for the first time since its founder was assassinated there.
President Trump announcing that a major pharmaceutical company, Pfizer, you see it on screen, will be cutting drug costs. How this might impact what you pay for prescription drugs.
Financial literacy is trending, but today's lessons aren't always coming from schools. Gen Z and millennials are turning to TikTok, YouTube, and influencers for money advice. We have expert advice on navigating this new trend.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Today is Wednesday, October 1st. You're watching NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, a government shutdown kicked in overnight. The last time this happened was during President Trump's first term. It lasted 35 days, making it the longest shutdown in history. Now, President Trump and Republicans say Democrats are making unreasonable health care demands. NTD's Melina Weiskup joins us live. Melina, good morning. What a morning it is. Last night, senators tried again to pass a short-term funding bill, but it failed for a second time. Why is that?
Hi, good morning, Steph. So that vote fell short of the 5 Democrat votes that it needed in the Senate. Just 2 Democrats and 1 independent who caucuses with Democrats, Angus King, voted with Republicans to support the Republican bill. Now, remember, Steph, this is the same Republican bill that's a clean, short-term 7-week extension of federal funds just to keep the government running through November, allowing more space for the budget work and those negotiations to go on. But like we've talked about before, Democrats are set on their health care demands. They want Republicans to repeal the Medicaid changes that they made in the big, beautiful bill. They also want Obamacare tax subsidies. Now, Republicans, of course, say those demands are unreasonable. But we knew Medicaid and Obamacare was going to be a sticking point throughout the term of this Congress since Republicans passed the big, beautiful bill and Democrats made a big fuss about it back when they passed that bill a few months ago. So now Democrats are just trying to amplify that messaging around health care. Listen to both sides of the aisle.
There's going to be a crescendo as through the beginning of October, the vast majority of Americans get those bills. And they're going to say, what the heck are we going to do? We need health care, but we can't afford it. The data shows that that's one of the most important things to the American people. So we want to sit down and negotiate.
Democrats may have chosen to shut down the government tonight, but we can reopen it tomorrow. All it takes is a handful of Democrats to join Republicans to pass the clean, nonpartisan funding bill that's in front of us.
Now, Senate Leader John Thune is planning to go talk go on talks with one-on-one Democrat members to try to get those remaining few Democrat holdouts needed to pass the short-term extension. So remember, they are 5 votes short, according to last night's tally, but it is an improvement as far as Democrat support goes, with just one more Democrat joined with Republicans on last night's vote versus last week's vote on the same bill, Steph.
All right, so how will Americans be affected now that the shutdown is in effect?
Yeah, it's an important question. The impacts won't be too dramatic for everyday Americans. If people receive Social Security checks, food stamps, or WIC benefits, those benefits will still continue to come. But if there are new applicants out there, they could take longer to process the application, so you won't know whether or not you're eligible for those benefits for a while, or it could slow down the process for you. So just expect that. Also, passport applications may be slowed. So if you're planning to travel overseas, be prepared to apply for that passport ahead of time. Now, as for flights, air traffic personnel are essential workers, so initially there won't be any impact. But what we saw in 2019 when the government shut down at that time is that over the time that the shutdown lengthened, workers started taking sick days to show their frustration with missing checks, which caused some flight delays there. As for national parks, they'll have very low staffing, but most public parks should remain open.
And how does this all end, Melina?
Yeah, I think it might have to end, Steph, with Democrats joining with Republicans to support that Republican short-term funding bill. Trump has already told Republicans not to deal with those Democrat demands because he feels that those demands are a non-starter. But you also have the possibility that some Republicans could give Democrats a little something in return, perhaps assurances that they'll provide more room for debate on healthcare issues like Obamacare. Or look, if Thune is going around right now and talking one-on-one with Democrat senators, and he offers to take up some of those bills for those individual senators or something like that, we could see him peel off one by one enough Democrats to get on board with it. Republican leader John Thune says he plans to hold multiple votes today on that same Republican short-term funding bill to pressure those Democrat holdouts, Steph.
All right, and there already have been some, crossing the aisle, so there is some precedent this time around for that, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you so much for this update. NTD congressional correspondent Melina Wisecup. Next, new U.S. tariffs on pharmaceuticals, heavy-duty trucks, and home goods took effect at midnight as well.
That's right. President Trump says the levies are designed to protect American manufacturers from what he calls unfair foreign competition.
Imported heavy-duty trucks now face a 25% tariff. Branded drugs made abroad will be hit with a 100% tariff unless the company is building plants in the U.S. And home furnishings like kitchen cabinets and upholstered furniture will be hit with duties of up to 50%.
Trump says the measures will boost domestic industry and protect jobs. Some industry analysts warn, though, that the higher import costs could raise consumer prices, but new vehicle and home sales remain strong as the time being.
President Trump announced yesterday that Pfizer will heavily discount their medications for Americans. NTD Washington correspondent Mario Otsu has more.
President Trump is announcing that Pfizer will significantly lower its drug costs for Americans and invest $17 billion in U.S. pharma manufacturing and research. Now, these drugs will be available on a federal government website called TrumpRx.gov, which the White House says they hope will go live by early 2026. President Trump made this announcement in the Oval alongside FDA Commissioner Marty McCary and HHS Secretary RFK Jr., along with the CEO of Pfizer himself, Albert Bourla. Take a look.
Pfizer has agreed to provide some of their most popular current medications to all consumers at heavily discounted prices of anywhere between 50 and even 100%, and that's off the price.
Also in the deal, all new medications introduced by Pfizer to the American market will be sold at reduced most favored nation, also known as MFN costs.
But it's called most favored nation. We are going to pay the lowest price there is in the world. We will get whoever is paying the lowest price, that's the price that we're going to get. So remember that.
The deal also includes Pfizer offering all their prescription medications to Medicaid at MFN prices.
It's going to have a huge impact on bringing Medicaid costs down, like nothing else. They couldn't test. God bless you, Bobby. I hope I didn't catch COVID just there.
According to an HHS department report released last year, drug prices are nearly 3 times as high in the U.S. as they are in other developed countries.
We refuse to make the most vulnerable citizens continue to pay an unthinkable price for the world's pharmaceutical breakthroughs, which we pay for.
In May, the president signed an executive order directing drug makers to offer U.S. patients this lower matched price for their medicines. But unhappy with the progress by July, the president then wrote letters to the CEOs of 17 pharmaceutical companies demanding lower prices by September 29.
And I would like to read you one of these letters to the CEO of Eli Lilly. Moving forward, the only thing I will accept from drug manufacturers is a commitment that provides American families immediate relief from the vastly inflated drug prices.
Pfizer is the first to respond to the president's letter. Pfizer will be given a 3-year grace period from President Trump's pharmaceutical tariffs as long as they move production to the U.S.
The big winner of this deal clearly will be the American patient. There is no doubt about it. We are ready to unleash our investment portfolio in this country.
The president says that he's making deals with other drug makers and teases that these deals will be coming in over the next week. Meanwhile, also in the Oval Office, President Trump signed an executive order investing an additional $50 million for AI research on finding a cure for pediatric cancer.
President Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth spoke to hundreds of top U.S. military leaders yesterday.
That's right. Trump says the U.S. has focused too long on external wars while being invaded from within. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Defending the homeland is the military's first and most important priority. That's what it is. Only in recent decades did politicians somehow come to believe that our job is to police the far reaches of Kenya and Somalia, while America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within.
President Trump says America is being invaded from within, no different from a foreign enemy, but without uniforms. Trump made those comments on Tuesday, speaking to hundreds of generals, admirals, and senior enlisted troops at Marine Corps Base Quantico in Virginia. He touted the use of deploying troops to Los Angeles and then to D.C., which led to a major drop in crime there. He also discussed plans for deployments in Chicago and Portland, Oregon.
We should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military, because we're going into Chicago very soon. That's a big city. Portland, Oregon, where it looks like a war zone.
Trump also highlighted improved military recruiting and retention, as well as an increase in defense spending.
We're investing tens of billions of dollars in modernizing our nuclear deterrence capabilities like never before. And we've begun construction on what we call the Golden Dome missile defense shield. It'll be the most sophisticated in the world.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth also spoke to the military brass, emphasizing the shift in military culture with stricter standards.
For too long, we've promoted too many uniformed leaders for the wrong reasons, based on their race, based on gender quotas. It's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon.
He also directed that all troops in combat roles will have to meet the highest male standards.
But when it comes to any job that requires physical power to perform in combat, those physical standards must be high and gender neutral. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is.
Hegseth also defended his firing of many military officials that allowed these policies to flourish at the department. And President Trump signed an executive order in early September renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War, a title it held since George Washington all the way until just after World War II. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And joining us now live to discuss both speeches on the cultural shift and changes being implemented in the military are Colonel Darren Gaub. He's a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, former battalion commander with the U.S. Army, and author of Veritas Vincent. We also welcome Mike Sorelli, retired Navy SEAL and Chief Talent Officer of Overwatch Mission Critical, as well as the author of The Everyday Warrior. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining. Darren, let's start with Secretary Hegseth's speech. He's calling for a return to a culture and standards from 1990. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, hey, as a guy who enlisted in the Army in 1991, I tell you that the standards then were a lot harder than what they were when I retired. So I think it's important that the key word there is standard. Once you establish that, you don't move it unless you have absolute good reason to. And you don't do that because someone's a male or a female or because they're, pick your identity or whatever. The standard should be high. It should remain there. We want our forces to be elite for a reason because they're asked to do the hardest things in the world. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I think the speech was excellent. I think it was well received. I know it addresses many of the topics that I've been concerned about for a very long time. And I want to watch closely the application of these policies throughout the ranks and see how much effect they have on the military, both in the near term and in the long term, because this is more than just a 3-year problem. This is going to take quite a while to fix what's happened to the military over the past year. So again, looking forward to it. Great speech. I think it was time well invested.
And Mike, the secretary also emphasized this concept of not walking on eggshells, saying that it's good for commanders to temper their cadets. Your views on that?
Well, first, I didn't realize that Darren was that old. I'm glad to hear he's on AARP. That's to my friend. So, hey, let me say this. Probably the most eloquent, direct, on-point speech I've ever heard the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, give. And I've known him for a while. And he couldn't have been more right. You know, when it comes to culture, there's no other culture other than accountability. And if you don't have a culture of accountability, you don't have standards. So within the military, Darren and I are not the only ones concerned about this. People who poured into their careers, that made this their profession, that wanted to be the very best at what they do. But not all soldiers were that way, and they were allowed to sort of follow this path of mediocrity, and we just sort of allowed it. What it did for the leaders and walking on eggshells, what he's referring to there, is we didn't have the ability, either out of fear or just due to regulations that would be viewed as toxic, to hold people to a very high standard in a profession of arms where the outcome is life and death. So, you know, I watched the entire 45-minute speech. I could not be more happy. What I found interesting, and I'm sure Darren did as well, is that there wasn't one round of applause for Pete when he walked off the stage. So I'm going to be interested to see how much silent protest amongst the generals goes on after this new policy and this new direction.
You bring up an interesting point. Darren, what are your thoughts? 800 generals and admirals called from all around the world with very little notice. And as Mike mentioned, you know, really no applause. I don't know if that's sort of what, I've never been in such a room. But do you think that there's maybe fear or uncertainty among the leadership and ranks of the military?
Well, there could be. And thanks to Mike, by the way, for pointing out AARP status that makes a person feel great. It was unusual to see this many in one place in the first place. I think they thought the risk was worth the reward for having so many people in one theater. Yeah, probably with people trying to listen in and you name it. So again, the risk calculation was there. They thought it was worth it. The message clearly needed to be heard. And sometimes you can't hear a message other than face-to-face. Zoom calls or online collaboration tools don't always get the message across the way it needs to be put across, especially when the secretary is followed by the president. They can look people in the face. I'm concerned about the fact that there's probably about 10 to 15% of the people in there that are actively sorting out how they're going to continue to resist this edict in the first place. And we're seeing it online all the time. We've got sources around the world calling out military members who are promoting everything from celebration of Charlie Kirk's murder to saying Antifa is a wonderful organization, and that's all ranks, and the generals are involved as well. So there's a lot of work to do there. I suspect you reduce the ranks there by about 20%. That would help as well. I kind of expected to see that anyways. I thought there might be a go out the door, take a left, and submit your resignation papers if you don't think you could be in this military. Maybe that happened, but it just wasn't on camera.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm eager to get to Trump's speech, but one more question for you, Mike. There's this dichotomy that I observe within Hegseth, because he brought up Bible study and his faith in the speech, but he also talked about, you know, no messing around when it comes to lethality. How do you square that circle?
Well, as we say, there's no atheist in a foxhole. So religion is a large part of what we do, and especially in a combat zone, you find faith. Even if you were, let's say, a non-practicing Christian or an atheist up to that point, some people find a way to find God. So it is a big part. You know, being a warrior is about ethics and values and character. And yes, we do have a very dirty job to remove evil from this planet. And at the end of the day, the profession of arms is about peace. But, one of the things, and I want to mention this, the left has had an outcry about the fact that, Secretary of War paid all this money to have 800 generals in one room and the cost behind that. But if a CEO of a 200,000 person or employee company calls 1,000 of his leaders into one room, that's a strong, decisive call by a leader to make sure they're aligned. That's what Pete was doing here. He wanted there to be very little room of misunderstanding about the direction and the strategy of the War Department moving forward. And he did that. And he is done. And the leftist media will never like Pete. He has done what so many of us have wanted within the Department of War for so very long. And so I have nothing but applause and support for what Pete has done. And this is actually a military in which I would have wanted to serve. I mean, he talked about standards, ROEs, the fitness, the fact that combat positions, ground close in combat, requires very strict standards. And people have been trying to erode that with social experiments. All of that is done. Make no mistake, full stop.
Yeah, there was certainly no mincing of words yesterday in what you pointed out, a 45-minute speech, mostly done, it looked like, unscripted. He was in front of the teleprompters. Darren, let's move over to Trump's comments. Quite different. I mean, he talked a little bit about culture. He focused a lot about the enemy from within and using military capabilities on U.S. inner cities as a training ground. The D.C. mayor had admitted that the military deployment very much made an impact on cleaning up the city, and she took a lot of heat for that. Yet, for some reason, it seems quite partisan. So your thoughts about deployment of military resources to inner cities?
Yeah, first of all, I'd say that Washington, D.C. is different than Chicago and Portland only in the fact that D.C. has different laws and regulations around it because of what it is. It's not a state. These state governors and other elected representatives who are supposed to represent the needs of the people and the will of the people where they live. What they hate about this thing is not about having military in the streets where they have failed to do their own job as governors and specifically or as mayors. It's the fact that being there is showing the failure in stark contrast of their policies for years. Look how fast it took to clean up Washington, D.C. Now, setting the constitutional argument aside about how you use the active duty service or even federalized National Guard members in American cities, Mayor or Governor Pritzker, people like that, they're not concerned at all about the actual Constitution. What they're concerned about is the view of that Americans will have of them once the National Guard even spends 30 days in their cities cleaning things out and showing what those cities are capable of being, places where citizens can walk the streets and not worry about getting mugged. When and if that happens, you're going to continue to see the left absolutely flip out and hate it because their failures have been magnified on a national scale. And I, for one, am looking forward to seeing it. I know there's a heavy constitutional debate about this, and there should be. That's healthy.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Even just here in New York City, I see that on the streets. People are using it as a bathroom. You can see people are sleeping out on the streets who've been on drugs all night. So there's a problem in the inner cities, and how we get to a solution is something that I'm glad the conversation is happening. Really appreciate both of you joining. A fascinating discussion. Darren Gaub, Mike Sorelli, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The White House has pulled back its pick to lead the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It has ended economist E.J. Antony's nomination before a confirmation hearing was ever scheduled. President Trump had tapped Antony last month after abruptly firing BLS chief Eric McIntyre. He accused her of manipulating the government's jobs data. The White House insists Antony will continue his work at the Heritage Foundation, praising him as a brilliant economist and promising a new nominee very soon. Several Republicans, including Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski, had raised concerns about Antony's nomination. The nomination also drew fire from some economists who warned it threatened the independence of America's jobs data. The BLS was set to release a September jobs report on Friday, but the government shutdown could force another delay. Still to come, Bermuda braces for the impact from Hurricane Imelda.
Several homes along the North Carolina coast swept away as two hurricanes caused heavy surf.
And authorities detonate a suspicious device at Utah State University hours before a Turning Point USA event. The organization returns to Utah for the first time since Charlie Kirk's assassination. with Governor Spencer Cox in attendance.
And major arrests as ICE takes alleged pedophiles and human traffickers off the streets. And Missouri activates the National Guard to assist with the rounding up of illegal immigrants. We're going to have that and more. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. We turn now to the weather and 2 hurricanes over the Atlantic.
5 homes have collapsed into the surf on North Carolina's Outer Banks as Umberto and Imelda raise powerful waves.
The homes in Buxton had been perched on stilts but toppled into the waves as heavy surf pounded the shoreline. Debris, including wood, furniture, and even an entire house, was swept along the beach as waves surged in.
Fortunately, no injuries were reported, but park officials warned more collapses could follow and urged visitors to avoid the area. Forecasters say dangerous surf conditions from both hurricanes will continue along the East Coast this week.
Meanwhile, Bermuda is bracing for a direct hit from Hurricane Imelda. The storm is packing 85-mile-per-hour winds and is expected to strengthen into a Category 2 hurricane today.
Bermuda's Minister of National Security called the storm a serious threat. The island's airport, schools, and government offices are shutting down ahead of the storm. And Immigration and Customs Enforcement is getting some help in Missouri. Governor Mike Kehoe has given the go-ahead to the state's National Guard to assist ICE in various tasks. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on that, plus updates on major ICE arrests, including suspected child predators, human traffickers, and violent criminals.
To our nation's soldiers.
Governor Mike Kehoe says Missouri is proud to join the Trump administration's efforts to keep the state and nation secure. He says public safety and the rule of law are his top priorities. Kehoe Tuesday authorized the Missouri National Guard to help make that a reality. Soldiers will help out with administrative, clerical, and logistical duties. Meanwhile, ICE is pushing back against accusations from Broadville, Illinois Mayor Katrina Thompson. She said federal agents were making war on the community. ICE Director Todd Lyon says the real threat comes from violent rioters targeting the Broadview Processing Center. He says local police have failed to intervene despite requests from ICE for assistance. Lyon says the lack of help from local cops has enabled agitators to escalate violence and placed federal officers, first responders, and Broadview residents in harm's way. The ICE director condemned fear-mongering and misinformation, warning it could fuel more violence. In just the past week, ICE says rioters arrested near the facility included 3 men carrying loaded firearms.
As politicians in states like Illinois continue to criticize ICE for its actions, the agency says it's going about its work rounding up dangerous criminals.
ICE says its latest arrests include pedophiles, drug dealers, and violent criminals. Some arrests include Walter Ramiro Hernandez Ortiz from Honduras, accused of lewd and lascivious behavior and battery. Jose Hilario Moreno Portillo from Honduras, arrested for sexual assault of a child. And Diony Mendez Lopez, a criminal illegal immigrant from Mexico, arrested for assault on a police officer, driving drunk, and resisting arrest. ICE Tuesday confirmed the arrest of 24 illegal immigrants in Wisconsin with suspected ties to a transnational human trafficking and drug trafficking ring. The intelligence-driven operation was based on information received from the FBI while interviewing alleged victims of the ring, including children. Some of those arrested had previously been convicted of sexually assaulting a child, hit and run, driving drunk or impaired, identity theft, and possession of narcotic equipment. Meanwhile, in Portland, Oregon, ICE arrested 4 criminal illegal immigrants accused of conducting laser strikes on a Customs and Border Protection helicopter. ICE called it an attempt to temporarily blind the pilot's ability to see, adding it was incredibly dangerous for the aircraft personnel and for the public safety. Aiming a laser pointed at an aircraft is a federal crime, and during the investigation it was determined the laser came from a nearby residence. A search warrant conducted by the FBI and Homeland Security investigations found 4 criminal illegal immigrants occupying the residence where the laser originated.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem sent a warning: you lay a hand on law enforcement, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And the Justice Department has launched an investigation into Iowa's largest school district over its diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The inquiry comes just days after ICE arrested the Des Moines Public School District Superintendent, who was in the country illegally and was reportedly passionate about DEI.
The Justice Department did not mention the superintendent in its announcement. Officials cited the district's website and documents as possible evidence of violating federal anti-discrimination laws.
And next, tense moments at Utah State University, hours before the first Turning Point USA event in the state since Charlie Kirk's assassination.
Utah State in Logan is just 2 hours north of Utah Valley University, where Kirk was killed last month. Law enforcement yesterday detonated a suspicious device found on campus. Here are the details on that.
Authorities evacuated Utah State's old main building after an employee spotted someone place a device under a tree outside. A bomb squad later determined it was not explosive but detonated out of caution. The university says it does not believe it was an intentional threat or related to the event. The scare came amid heightened security for Turning Point USA's event, the first in Utah since founder Charlie Kirk was assassinated at Utah Valley University earlier this month. Thousands of students and supporters packed Utah State's arena to hear from speakers including Governor Spencer Cox and former Utah Congressman Jason Chavez. Wellness podcaster with Turning Point Alex Clark kicked off the event with a message.
I'm not here to eulogize Charlie Kirk. I am here to pass the torch on to every single one of you.
Security was visibly tight. Drones overhead, metal detectors at every entrance, and tactical teams on site. Despite the scare and heavy security, the night was less about mourning and more about carrying on the movement Charlie Kirk started.
We are witnessing the most powerful conservative youth movement in the history of America.
Utah Governor Spencer Cox urged people across the political spectrum to treat each other with respect.
He very passionately believed that anger never persuades and that hostility never convinces anyone. Peacemaking is not soft. It's the hardest thing you can do.
For many in the crowd, Kirk was a voice of truth, whose death has only strengthened their resolve.
I love that Charlie had that impact on so many people, and so many people have come out of the woodwork and declared who they are religiously, and I think it's a phenomenal thing.
Turning Point has seen tens of thousands of requests to start new chapters across schools nationwide.
President Trump said a deal with Harvard University is drawing near. The Ivy League school would agree to open trade schools to provide instruction on artificial intelligence, engines, and other vocational programs. That would be part of a proposed $500 million settlement for past events of anti-Semitism and discrimination.
Trump called it a big investment in trade schools done by very smart people, citing the need for skilled employees. The president added that what he called their sins would be forgiven. A legal battle between the two sides began after Trump froze billions of dollars in federal funding over anti-Semitism and DEI practices. Harvard called the move unconstitutional and a violation of free speech.
And the Oktoberfest Beer Festival in Munich was closed this morning following the discovery of explosives in a residential building north of the city.
Officials also discovered a bomb threat to Oktoberfest in a letter from the alleged perpetrator.
Police say explosives were deliberately set on fire following a domestic dispute in the building, with one person dead.
Specialized teams were called to the scene to defuse booby traps set in the building, and they're still investigating the area.
The festival will also remain shut until at least 5 p.m. local time while police search the fairgrounds for the explosives.
Munich's Oktoberfest is the world's largest beer festival. It attracts up to 6 million visitors annually. Celebrations began on September 5th and they go through October 5th.
Coming up, federal agencies determined that the Minnesota Department of Education violated Title IX after allowing transgender athletes to compete in girls' sports.
And a Senate committee hears witness testimony about a screening program designed to mitigate terrorism that's allegedly being used to surveil ordinary citizens. We're going to have that and more. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. The government shutdown kicked in last night at midnight after the Senate failed to pass a second short-term funding bill, falling short by 5 votes. Democrats are demanding the repeal of Medicaid changes in Trump's big, beautiful bill and an extension to Obamacare subsidies, while Republicans are saying the demands are unreasonable. Thousands of federal workers are expected to be laid off during the shutdown, some potentially even fired long term. President Trump announced yesterday that Pfizer will heavily discount their medications for Americans, and they're going to invest $17 billion into U.S. pharmaceutical manufacturing and research. These discounted drugs will be available on a federal government website, trumprx.gov, which the White House is working to launch by early 2026. Pfizer will be given a 3-year grace period from Trump's pharmaceutical tariffs as long as they begin the move of production to the U.S. immediately. And Immigration and Customs Enforcement is getting back up in Missouri. Governor Mike Kehoe has authorized the state's National Guard to assist ICE with administrative and logistical duties. And ICE is pushing back on accusations from an Illinois mayor saying violent agitators, not agents, are what threaten communities. And in nationwide operations, ICE says it has arrested suspected child predators and human traffickers. And there was a bomb scare at Utah State University just hours before a Turning Point USA event, the first in Utah since Charlie Kirk's assassination. A bomb squad detonated a suspicious device out of caution, though they said it likely had nothing to do with the event and wasn't an explosive. Security was already heightened as thousands packed the arena to honor Kirk and carry on his movement. Those are this morning's top headlines. With that, Steph, over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. Next, the debate over transgender athletes continues. 2 federal agencies say Minnesota's Department of Education and State High School League violated Title IX. The state agencies are accused of allowing male athletes to compete in girls' sports. The joint finding comes from the Departments of Education and Health and Human Services. It concludes that over the course of several years, Minnesota allowed male athletes to compete on several girls' sports teams, including lacrosse, track and field, and volleyball. The federal departments conducted a 2-month-long investigation into state policies. The state and its education agencies have 10 days to amend their policies to comply with Title IX and President Trump's Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports executive order. And a Senate committee yesterday examined the perceived weaponization of an airport screening program called Quiet Skies. The program was originally designed to mitigate threats posed by unknown or partially known terrorists.
But whistleblowers and investigators say the program was used to surveil ordinary American passengers. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
In mid-2024, as she grew increasingly critical of the Biden administration and increasingly involved with the Trump campaign, Tulsi Gabbard noticed changes as she went to the airport. She had more screening. Federal agents with dogs showing up for her flights. Other federal agents followed her on the plane and reported back on her activity.
Senator Rand Paul, chair of a Homeland Security Committee, speaking about an investigation into allegations of corruption in the Quiet Skies program. Quiet Skies is an airport screening program designed to mitigate threats posed by unknown or partially known terrorists. It was implemented in 2012 as part of the Secure Flight Vetting Program, which monitored a select list of individuals known or suspected of engaging in terrorist activities. Individuals on the select list could be subject to extended screening measures called Special Mission Coverage, or SMC. It includes screenings involving K-9 teams, pat-downs, luggage search, and air marshal surveillance. But witnesses testified on Tuesday that the Quiet Skies program assigns SMC to passengers who are not on the selected list or even on the terrorist watch list at all. Federal Air Marshal Mark Crowder, a whistleblower, said the system has eroded.
On July 15, 2021, while serving in the Houston Field Office Operations Unit, I was monitoring special mission coverage flights in our area of responsibility. To my shock, I discovered that my wife, Christine, seated behind me, had been flagged in the FAMS system as a domestic terrorist, falsely accused of entering the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021.
Crowder said his wife was nowhere near the Capitol that day, having only attended President Trump's rally. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem ended the Quiet Skies program in June. At that time, she said the program has, quote, failed to stop a single terrorist attack while costing U.S. taxpayers $200 million a year. Another witness on the panel testified that current intelligence director and former Senator Tulsi Gabbard was subjected to intrusive searches across 8 flights, which included surveillance by 3 federal air marshals per flight. At the end of the hearing, the chairman said the investigation is not over and that they are now looking into a project on extremism at George Washington University. They'll be looking into reports of research being conducted on people who refused to wear masks and people who attended the January 6th Trump rally. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And coming up, now that the government is closed, how does that impact you? We're going to speak with a financial planner for information and advice.
And 1,200-pound brown bear has been crowned winner of Alaska's annual Fat Bear Week. How Chunk, as he's known, rose to the top of the pack as voters picked their favorite bear. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Now that the government is closed, how does that impact you? We're joined now by Lawrence Sprung, founder of Midland Financial and the author of Financial Planning Made Personal, for insight and advice and information. Lawrence, good to have you with us this morning on what a remarkable day, really. Let's talk about how this is going to impact people directly. Will people continue to, for example, receive Social Security and SSI checks?
Yeah, so the quick answer to that question is yes, they're going to continue to receive those checks. The important thing here to remember is the government, now that they're shut down, can only spend on what is considered deemed essential services, and services like those you mentioned, Social Security, SSI, those things are essential to the country. So those will continue.
Okay, so does that also include Medicare, Medicaid benefits, related healthcare costs?
It does. Most of the things that you would think that are essential, right, for us are going to continue. I think the important thing here is to understand what is going to continue and what's not. Certain things like that are non-essential are like parks. Zoos, things like that are not essential to everyday economy. So those are not going to continue. And that's where, a lot of the impact's going to be seen on the hundreds of thousands of federal employees that are not going to be receiving their paycheck. That's where a lot of this gets troubling.
And for some of that group, I believe that pay will come later. For others, it may be unpaid, just time they have to do. Is that right?
No, for most people, once there's an agreement and the government reopens, those payments will be back paid and re-put back into place. It's almost as if they're being furloughed for that period of time. So it'll have an effect on the economy as we are during the shutdown. But at the same time, once those paychecks start rolling back out, it should have a boost on the economy. And at least let's keep in mind one thing: these shutdowns are very infrequent, and when they do happen, I think the last full shutdown was in 2013, and it lasted several days. So it doesn't happen that frequently, and when it does, it doesn't typically last very long.
There are so many small business owners across the U.S. who may have tight margins, and even a few days could impact them in a big way. What are you anticipating could be the impact on small businesses?
So, I mean, every business is different. So I think it depends on who they serve, right? If they serve federal employees and that's where they're relying on their revenue stream for their given business, they may be impacted more heavily because those families are not going to see a paycheck coming in each and every week. So those will be affected. If they're dealing with federal contracts where their business serves the federal government, depending on what arm of the government they're serving, that could have an impact. Other businesses, local Main Street businesses, if they're not in a community that is heavily saturated with federal employees, I would expect that there's not going to be as much of an impact with those folks. So, and again, I have to repeat myself, but, most shutdowns do not last very long. I think the median shutdown is about 5 days. So, hopefully this will be resolved very swiftly and stay true to that median or very close to it.
Yes, while it is somewhat extraordinary, there is a kind of system built in that will allow it to all snap back to basics in given time. But let's look back at the individuals. Will tax refunds be delayed?
Yeah, so I think the important thing with taxes are understand, because we're approaching the October 15th deadline, which is for those people that have filed for extension on their personal returns. That deadline does not go away. So you still have to file. You need to make sure that you're filing any tax filings that you need to file on time, estimated payments, things of that nature. Make sure you're doing those. Those tax refunds will still come, albeit there is a very high likelihood that they would be delayed to some degree. But the best thing and the best way to track that is go to the IRS's website, and they have a refund tracking system that you can go in, put your information in, and it will track your refund and let you know when you should expect that to come.
Okay, any final thoughts you want to share with people? We have about 30 seconds left from anyone who's worrying about it, or just ways to plan the potential disruptions.
Yeah, I think for those that are thinking about their investments, think about the fact that these are short, and fortunately, stocks are typically not really overly impacted either. Typically, they have an average return in the positive of 0.3% typically. And typically also after a shutdown, the returns on the markets are typically above average and can gain, significant double digits. We've seen that time and time again. So I think in the moment, it's a difficult thing to swallow, but at the same time, it doesn't typically have a lot of effect on what's going on. And I think the most troubling thing is that those people who are representing us in Congress are still getting paid, even though those other federal workers aren't. So I'd like to see some change there, but that's my piece for today.
All right, noted. Your voice has been heard here, Lawrence. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And turning now to the natural world, a battered but resilient brown bear named Chunk has been crowned champion of Alaska's Fat Bear Week.
That's right. This marks his first win at the fan favorite contest held at the end of the summer.
The annual online tournament follows 12 bears in Katmai National Park as they gorge on salmon to prepare for winter hibernation. Chunk, officially known as Bear 32, defeated rival bear 856 in the final bracket. Naturalists say he overcame a broken jaw, likely from a fight with another bear, relying on sheer size and determination to outlast his competitors.
Chunk is estimated to weigh about 1,200 pounds. The bear can gain several pounds a day during peak salmon runs. This year's event drew more than 1.5 million votes worldwide. They judged the bears on their growth over the summer and sometimes their looks or even their backstories.
Very sweet. Well, we've got much more coming up. Stay with us. See you soon.